Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review the latest film drop or throwback, celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie and snacks. So I am excited for tonight because I forgot how much I low-key was obsessed with this movie when I was a kid. And by low-key obsessed, I was like, I need to collect all the action figures. Like I forced my dad to go to when they would host little toy conventions at the Pomona Fairplex. I would specifically go because this movie came out at that time and I wanted everything. I think McDonald's was selling their toys, all that stuff, right? And I was just I forgot about this movie and how just utterly 90 campy sci-fi, cool, we got cutting edge graphic technology it was, and how utterly horrible, but also just amazing this film was. So I'm really excited to talk about it with all of you. And it's been my pleasure to have hosted, something with all of you in it and to be a part and a guest for some of you on it. So I'm really excited. But I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and right now I'm enjoying a wonderful little Mai Tai. And don't judge me because tonight I was like, I'm gonna just pig out. I have McDonald's, so sorry y'all. I had to get a double quarter pounder and some fries. I feel so bad, but you know what? Whatever. I'm hungry. Who cares? This is Nom Talk Network. We eat our feelings here. And I just want to introduce our guests and our lovely, wonderful individuals who are here. Mike, let's start with you. What's going on, man? Last time we did a wonderful review, and tonight we're going to do another one. What's going on? What are you nomming on?
Hey, what's up? Right now I'm nomming on some trail mix and water. Basic, very, very basic. Yeah, not much, man. Looking forward to talking about this classic sci-fi adventure.
I'm jealous because you basically are living off mana, right? You're living off trail mix and water, and I'm living off the fucking meat of the world. So, I'm not blessed. And then let's go to Eric. Eric, what's going on? I haven't seen you in a long time. What are you nomming on? What's going on in Colorado, man?
Crazy winds. You don't want to be here right now. I hear you guys are getting rain. I'm getting wind, so the earth is ending. But I am drinking a lovely Edline Brewing peaches and cream sour beer, which is delicious. And I ate earlier because I was starving after work and couldn't wait. But now I'm munching on some Jolly Ranchers because I love these candies.
Absolutely. Who doesn't love Jolly Ranchers, right? It's like a guilty pleasure, but it's also like a little, I don't know. I feel like Jolly Ranchers have been in my life forever, and I just love them. And if somebody's like, I hate Jolly Ranchers, I'm like, I question your existence. I question you and your spirit. So anyway, Toni, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. I feel like, God, when was the last time we did a review together?
Months ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't even been before the new year, if we're honest.
It absolutely was, and it's April. Yeah, but it's good to see you. What's going on? What are you nomming on?
I've got a collection of things. So I'm one of those people who just accumulate snacks throughout the day. And right now I'm surrounded by a multitude. So I've got my water bottle, got some ginger turmeric tea. I have little cutie oranges. I've got some mango slices. I have a dry throat. So apparently one of the things that people tell you to do is to if you mix salt and water and gargle with that, that'll help, right? Me, because I'm so salt addicted, I actually just straight up drink pickle juice.
Man,
absolutely.
So if you see me doing this, I do apologize if that grosses you out. But yeah, this is my own personal. This is my pickle bottle. So
wow.
Just throw in some whiskey and you can just be a pickleback, right? Just
I love those.
Boom, and then boom. I hate pickles. Everything. However, if that works for you, man, I'm not gonna yuck your yum.
Well, okay, so you have a quarter pounder hanging out with you right now.
Hell yeah.
the guy that I used to date in high school, I knew he had a crush on me because he worked at McDonald's, and I could tell that he liked me because he would stack up like 2 or 3 layers of pickles. So that way every single bite was like extra pickly. And it
Oh,
worked. So yeah.
I love that.
Pickles are a love language. Yay.
We love. I think my best friend said that to me one time, and I was like, "Hey, you can take any pickle off my plate as long as you want. Like, please, it has to like I'm the kind of person that like if it's in my burger and I chomp on it, I can't eat it. Like it's done. Like I'm done with it, and I have to like
Give it to
do it.
me.
So
And we're in.
yeah.
work out
Okay,
fine.
I'm glad. I have another pickle connoisseur that
A
I can give.
repository.
Yeah, right. That I can give my unwanted burger pickles to. And that sounds really weird in another context. But today we are talking about the 1998 version of Lost in Space. And if you haven't seen that movie, please like spend $2 or whatever it is to watch it because it is so interesting. I feel like it is a movie of its time, right? This is around the time of like the 90s sci-fi, like weird ass kick, like films, right? Like you have like The Fifth Element, which is definitely in my top 5 films of all time. You have all these wonderful, like cutting edge films that are coming out with this like new sort of like graphic technology, right? And I remember seeing this in sort of in the theater with my dad, and we had watched a little bit of the old school like TV series, right? That was originally, out, which was Lost in Space. And clearly it's about a family, the Robinson family, that gets sent out on a I don't know. I kind of feel like this is also like a typical like space sci-fi film where it's like the Earth is too overpopulated. We're all dying. We need to find another planet, right? But this one specifically was a series where this entire family would like warp to a different world every episode and try to see if it was habitable for human life. But then at the same time, they have no fucking idea where they're at in the universe, right? And so it was like sort of like a discombobulated sci-fi of sort of like a space adventure, right? And this film sort of tried to capture that. And what I loved about this is, when I was a kid, right? Like my dad got me into sci-fi early on when I was younger, got me into aliens, got me into just like robots, all this stuff, right? Like you have like oh my gosh, Terminator, right? Which like was really huge, right? Like you had all this stuff, and then you get this was just like a culmination of like robotics, space engineering, right? Like the Earth is dying, like we need to send a family out, right? And this entire cast, right, is like star-studded, right? Like you have like William Hurt, right? Like who is like monotone the entire fucking film, which is like one of my issues, right? You have like Lacey Chabert, who's the mean girl herself, right? Like Gretchen Wieners in this, right? You have Gary Oldman, right? Like fucking Gary Oldman, who huge ass like actor, right? Was in The Fifth Element, was also in Harry Potter, right? Sirius Black. You have Matt LeBlanc, for God's sake. Like you have a friend, right? Like in this film, Heather Graham, right? You have all these people that later on went to go on to do wonderful and amazing things. And I just absolutely didn't know like how star-studded this cast until I like rewatched it, and it was really good, right? But what are our early sort of like introductions to this? How did you see this film? And what were your early on impressions of this? Let's start with you, Toni.
Um, so this movie, I think, was like number one, I think only for like its first 2 weekends at most, because it had the unfortunate job of being being like the first blockbuster immediately after Titanic. So I think it was one of those things where it was the movie that kind of like broke the Titanic streak, but then I think Titanic retook it, if I'm remembering correctly. Somebody might have to fact check me on that one. But I remember going to see this movie in the theater. I'm pretty certain I was maybe of only like, it's very likely I was the only person in the theater. I may have been one of 4 at most. So it may have been that first couple of weeks, but I enjoyed it. I liked it. I think even then I had the same complaints about it that I think most of us are going to have about it, which was the CGI even back then was looking a little looking a little dodgy, even by 98 standards, because I think everyone understood that there was this cross section in the mid 90s where you had a really healthy mix of practical effects and CGI assisted effects. And I do want to emphasize CGI assisted. And when you start seeing sort of like, when it starts veering over towards this way, when the technology isn't like advanced enough to really carry it like on its own, you get sequences like Lost in Space. It wasn't the only movie like that. There were plenty of others that were kind of like, oh, okay, we decided to play with the new toy that is CGI and it didn't really work out for you. Okay. But overall, I thought it was fun. I thought there was, it had great style, had a great cast. Matt LeBlanc for me is sort of like the big, huge miscast in the cast, even though I do find him generally appealing and entertaining in this movie. But when you stack him up against Gary Oldman, Mimi Rogers, William Hurt, and even a very, very young Jared Harris, who apparently I didn't realize, like, he's not doing Jared Harris, who is like very, very famously English, does not do his own voice acting in this movie. They had to dub him because apparently they could not get the English accent out of him. Yeah, so when you stack, like, for example, Matt LeBlanc against all of like these really, really incredible actors, even when they're, just sort of giving, this is not like overly ambitious performances here. That for me is sort of like the only thing that kind of like starts to pull it down. We're going to talk about scores here in a little bit, but yeah, I liked it then. I liked it now. And even rewatching it, I just am kind of struck of like, there's more in here. There's more world building than I remember. There's more practical effects than I remember, because I think it's the bad CGI that stuck with me for so long. But I think there was a lot of care put into this movie. There was a lot invested into it. So yeah, I definitely liked it then and I like it now.
Yeah, and I think like I think your point's valid. I think when so watching it now, I was like, how was that passable for sure, let's put this out into major theaters and see that, because some of the CGI, and I was like, I know that's fake. And I knew as a kid I knew it was fake, but I still liked it, right? And I feel like it was almost sort of like trying too hard in a way where it was like, oh, let's put this out there, and then but here, like, look at the cast, like, look at everything else, and don't worry about this little, like, don't worry about how this looks like it was a toy from the 1960s, right? That's just like spinning, and then it just like explodes, and then here's a new, right? Like, here's a new ship. So I definitely feel that. Eric, let's go to you. What were your first introductions to this film?
Well, just like Tony, I was one of those ones who saw it in theaters, like one of the only ones who saw it in theaters, because I was about 9, 10 when it came out. So I was super about it. Like, Fifth Element was my jam, like all of that. So I was about it. Me and my dad went. Loved the movie for what it was, because it was campy, it was space, and the actors in it I'd seen in other things throughout time. So absolutely loved it. My issue, as well as Tony, is the practical effects or the CGI effects in it. They did it overboard a little bit. It kind of reminds me now, going back into what they did with Starship Troopers, was very much along the same line, which came out a year before, which I think they were relying a little bit too much on that instead of doing what like Star Wars did or anything like that to like bring in more practical effects. So that was my issue with it. But I love this movie. I love going back and watching it. Haven't watched it in years because it's one of those movies that just goes out of your mind. But watching it again last night, I was like, oh, this is great. Plus, my partner and everybody last night were just like, well, this happened in 2038 when they're leaving Earth to go on this adventure because like the planet's depleting. I'm like, well, that's not far off from us where we're at now, are we? But, so life imitating art. But yeah, no, I love this movie wholeheartedly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of said this earlier, and I think Tony, you weren't on yet, but I basically was like, it was a lot of fun. Like, just watching this film, like, you're having fun. And I feel like that overall for me, like, sort of overpowered like the fact that it looked just cheaply made. Like, it was like, yeah, like it was giving very much like Event Horizon, but not so much like clear sort of like graphics that were doing that. It was like, clearly we know that this might have been a low budget film, right? But while watching it, I was just like, I had fun the entire time. Even now, like I was watching it and I was like, oh shit, oh god, there wasn't a dull moment. I don't think there was a moment where I was just like, oh, this is stupid. Like this isn't happening right. And I feel like this is how you do a film that you want to cram sort of like a very specific niche fandom into without having to bore people at the same time. And I feel like it kind of did a good job in that aspect where it was just like I didn't feel bored, right? Like watching this even as an adult. So I feel like it's great. Mike, let's go to you. What did you think about this film? How did you get introduced to it?
Okay, so I saw this in theaters. Obviously, I think for all of us, the TV show was way before our time, but I actually liked like old TV shows and like seeing how they update them, and like like Brady Bunch and stuff like that. So for me, it was kind of fun to see how they updated this one, especially the robot. I was looking forward to seeing how they would update the robot, and I thought it was pretty cool. I just remember being into this movie because I was so tired of Titanic at the time because it came out and that was like number one for like weeks and weeks. I was like, oh my god! And then so I finally got to see something else, a big movie besides Titanic. So that was good. Yeah, I remember really liking it when I saw it in theaters, and then I read the reviews. I'm like, wow, I have really bad taste because everybody else hated it. But it was a fun movie, I thought, and I know they wanted to like continue it with like more with like sequel and stuff like that, and I was all for it, but yeah, apparently it just wasn't very good. So I mean, it was an interesting time. Yeah.
I mean, that happens
Yeah.
with all great bad movies. You always want a sequel, but you are the
Yeah.
only little cult section that likes the movie, so they're never going to go.
Exactly.
Yeah, and yeah, so as a kid, I was like, yeah, fuck Titanic, right? And then as I got older, I became an obsessive fan of Titanic, like an obsessive fan. I think I was the one that hosted, I don't know, Steph, you can fact check me, but I was the one that hosted the review that we did on here. Like, I fucking love that movie. I will go to the grave and say that Titanic is like an awesome movie. But it's James Cameron. Like, I get it. Like at this time, like it was like, oh, and then you're like, oh fuck, like it's just like Avatar, right? Which is also James Cameron, which is like, oh, it remains number one, and I'm like, fuck it, like that's not even a good film. Like I'm not here for that.
I never wanted a movie to fail so much as the second Avatar movie. I'm just,
I mean, yeah, but I get your point, right? It's like this was like competing, and Tony, you said this was competing against a major blockbuster film, right? And it like came out, and then it was like, oh, cool, and then people were just like, oh, ooh. And I think, Mike, I like when they introduced like the new robot, right? And then you sort of see sort of the old robot come back, right? Like and like such sort of like the design to come in, and people who were fans of like the show were like, oh, this is great, like it's all nostalgia, right? Let's actually get into that because there is a lot of sort of nostalgia that got introduced. Yeah, Steph said Jordyn did host the Titanic one with his collection of memorabilia. Yeah, I have like the special edition one that you can only get in like Ireland that like I bought at like a flea market for like $10, and it's like a huge box. Anyway, okay, wait. So Q says, I remember when this movie came out when I heard that Lacey Chabert from Party of Five was in it, and I was like, oh, I'm watching it. And I know of the original 60 series too. Yeah. Oh, Q ball redeemed, hydrate everyone. So everybody take a sip of whatever you having.
I think I'm the only one that didn't know who Lacey Chabert was.
Oh, Party of Five, all the way, loved it. I went for that as well because
I think at the time I didn't watch that show. So I still don't watch that show, but I mean, I had no idea who she was. I was like, okay.
So I still to this day didn't know. I thought she just appeared in Mean Girls, and then I thought she was just like a Hallmark bitch, and because she does like Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool, Lacey Chabert. Oh my god, Gretchen Wieners. And then I rewatched this, and I was like, that's fucking Lacey Chabert.
Oh yeah, no, Lacey Chabert in like the early 90s had a huge career. Like Party of Five, she was in a lot of movies. That's why she was cast in this, because she was pretty much Miss Popular. She was any like Lindsay Lohan, any of them in her day.
Yeah. Was she the most popular cast member at the time, or
no? I think
Matt LeBlanc probably was.
I think it was Yeah, it was for sure Gary Oldman was like the huge stacker. And then no,
Mhm.
go Tony.
So it was I mean Gary Oldman, like if you're someone who like enjoys dramatic roles,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I knew
yeah.
him
then
right away.
you're like, yeah, Gary Oldman, but I don't remember him being the top build. Like I remember it being William Hurt, Matt LeBlanc, Heather Graham, because I think this
Yeah.
is this after Boogie Nights with Heather Graham?
yes, this is
It
right
must have
after.
been because I watched it because I was one of the reasons I watched it was because of her at the
Right.
time.
And Lacey Chabert was they were like, well, the teens are gonna go and watch it because of Lacey Chabert. And Party of Five was like every single one of those people that was on that show. It was like Scott Wolf, it was what's his name, Matthew
Chris,
Fox.
what's her name?
The dude from Lost, basically, is how I remember him. And then Jennifer Love Hewitt. And so Lacey Chabert, after like all these like wildly very like popular, especially with the teen crowd, she was like the fourth lead on that show. But on this one, she's also like the lead, like she was the selling point, you know, for all the teen magazines. So that's what I remember because I definitely was target demographic for like Lacey Chabert in the new Lost in Space reboot. Like, go check it out.
Yeah, let's actually talk about the cast since we're here. I know I said I wanted to talk about nostalgia, but let's talk about the cast because I feel like a lot of these people, like you said, had their own niches and like people were drawn from different sort of like areas of the entertainment world to come and see this. Like William Hurt, right? Like he clearly is Daddy Robinson, and I was like, hey, Daddy Robinson. And he is like the thing about William Hurt is in this movie, and the thing that pissed me off while I watched it again is it's monotone the entire time. There is no like substance, and it's always like, yeah, okay, this is what I'm doing. Okay, I'm gonna get a little angry, but then that's it. And then that's and then I'm gonna just yeah. So with William Hurt, I was like, I get it, but at the same time, there's so much more like that could have been done with the Robinson dad. I definitely loved. Okay, so I definitely love the choice of Gary Oldman playing sort of like the psycho doctor
Yeah.
who clearly, right? And if any of you have seen the new Netflix series, which is not good, you need somebody who's sort of versatile and sort of somebody that because this doctor is incredibly intelligent, but is absolutely out of their mind, right? Like the absolutely epitome of mad scientist, right? Like it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine, but like I have all these other ideas that might kill you, but it would look good in the end, right? Like, and it'd be fine. And I feel like Gary Oldman was like perfect in that sense, right? You have Heather Graham, right, who clearly is like I don't know. I don't want to say typecasted, but it's just like, okay, cool. Like you're the pretty daughter who's like the engineer, does all this stuff, right? And clearly Matt LeBlanc, who's like the military guy who's coming in and is gonna like take over and do the ship, is gonna come after. And then clearly there's some tension there, right? I feel like Lacey Chabert was like definitely cast in the right sort of like role, right? She did it. She did. And the other person that kind of pissed me off, like, and didn't in the past but does now, is Will Robinson, right? Like you have one emotion the entire time, which is like, I'm a kid and I get it. You're a young kid, like you're spunky, you're smart, you're intelligent. Your dad doesn't care what you have to do, right? But it was so monotone for me, right? And I feel like the more versatile was Mrs. Robinson, right? Like in this entire thing, where it was like she needed to be and act exactly how she needed to per the scene, right? Like that she was in. So what did we think about the cast? Eric, let's start with you.
I really enjoyed the cast. There were, like we were saying, there were big names of the time. What I enjoyed about this movie a lot is that it did kind of try to break a couple of them out of what they had been doing. For instance, Heather Graham, like you said, she was typecasted. Before this, she had just been doing like really sexually provocative roles like Boogie Nights and everything like that. She was just sexualized. So this was the first one that it was just like, it's an action movie. She's not going to be half dressed throughout the entire movie, and we're actually going to see what she can do. So that was exciting. Same thing with Matt LeBlanc. Him coming from Friends and a couple of things that he'd done on TV. He never really had a major movie role to prove what he could do. So that's also why I was kind of excited about this. Watching it now, Gary Oldman's character, however much I love it, also kind of pisses me off because it reminds me of his exact character from The Fifth Element. They're right along the same of like, we're not going to let this happen. I'm crazy. I'm powerful. I'm maniacal. Same thing, which pisses me off because they could have done way more with him and made him way better. William Hurt always kind of is on that monotone level with me. So he gave what he gave. Mimi Rogers, love her, seen her in a lot of things. Austin Powers, and she completely can span the scope of it. But yeah, love the cast, love what they did. Lacey Chabert played the bratty kid that she did on Party of Five. My real big impressive thing was her when she did Mean Girls and was kind of like ditzier and everything like that. So, but no, give me this cast any day. Even today, if they were do a reboot of them now older, I would watch it.
Yeah, Brutus is just as cute as Caesar. Okay, Toni, what did you think about the cast? What are your thoughts?
I had the same thought about Gary Oldman. I was like, this is shades of Zurg from Fifth Element. It's definitely the same motivation, but he takes it into a more pretentious way, whereas in Fifth Element, he's definitely more like slapsticky, and I don't know where this Southern accent comes from in Fifth Element, but he definitely made a choice to like distinguish the two. But the motivations, the dialogue was very similar into like, he's basically available for the highest bidder, just because he believes like, essentially some like capitalist form of nihilism. And he's just pretty much like, hey, if I've got enough money, I'll be able, and he doesn't give a shit. We're assuming that he's like 40, 50 years old. So he's only, whether or not they populate a new planet is kind of like beyond him, which is such like a boomer perspective, which I was like, that rings true. So like it definitely felt like an authentic performance. So I appreciated Gary Oldman. Love Mimi Rogers. I have no complaints about Mimi Rogers. I think my only complaint is that they very much sideline all the women in the third act because they just didn't know what to do with them. And I'm like, fair, if you don't know what to do with them, there's no point in just shoving them in there. So but that's my only thing, and it's only because I enjoyed her throughout acts 1 and 2. Heather Graham, same thing. Like I knew her as like, the sex pot, like Boogie Nights, I think she had already been in the Austin Powers movies at this point. So she was very much like the ditzy blonde and like the skimpy outfit. So this was her like breaking out of type, but she was still very much like damsel in distress, but smart damsel. So it's different, right?
It's like new Belle, but like inventor, but still
Exactly.
syndrome. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like
exactly. As far as William Hurt, like he's very much like a brow actor. Like everything in his performance just happens here, and that's it. And that's all you ever need, as long as you've just got like that lighting that's just right there, and you can tell exactly like the intensity that's happening in that moment. That's all he needs to do. So as far as him being monotone, that's just kind of how I know him. So I didn't expect much else. Granted, I don't really know too much about his earlier work, so maybe there is like a variety there that I'm just like not aware of. Lacey Chabert's being Lacey Chabert. She's being this is all types, right? Like you're just trying to do this shorthand of like, here's like your youngest smart kid, here's your rebellious teenager, here's your, golden child who very much is following in the steps of her workaholic father, and here's the mom just trying to keep it all together. Matt LeBlanc for me though. I don't understand what he's doing. I think he thinks he's being solo Harrison Ford, but it doesn't quite get there. And I don't know why, because he's saying the words and he's doing the cool guy like Smolder, like he's doing the thing that he should be doing, right? And it just doesn't get there. I was cruising around the IMDb trivia page and it mentioned how he basically was filming this and Friends at the same time, and he was just
he was
So I have to believe that maybe that's why he didn't have an opportunity to really just kind of like sit there with his character and get comfortable, because there are some moments where I'm just like, he's very comfortable, and those are usually his more funny and kind of like over the top goofy moments, especially when he's trying to flirt with Heather Graham's character. But any other time that he's like Major Don West, like soldier, and it's just like his salute is just a little too aggressive, his volume is just a little too high, and you're just kind of like, I don't know what you think you're doing. But overall, I don't hate it. I'm just kind of like, oh, that's a choice, and you did that, and now it's in the movie. All right. It really does feel like they didn't have a lot of time to really work with him and to really get like the best of like 20 or so takes. Maybe they only had enough time for 3 takes and they just were like, well, let's do those 3 and that's what we're going with. So that's my only complaint when it comes to this cast. I think everybody else, and Jared Harris, I completely forgot that he was in this. And I was like, that's Dumbledore's son. That's him. That's the dude. That's Moriarty. And I was like, that is not his voice. So that was very surprising to me. So I'd be very interested to hear what that original dialogue sounded like. But those are my only thoughts about the cast, though. Overall, generally positive, but just some sort of like, oh, okay, that's a choice. So
yeah, Jared Harris for sure. I was like as a kid, you're like, who the fuck is this, right? And then like as you get older, you're like, oh shit, like I forgot he was there, right? And like all that stuff right towards the end, where you're like, oh my god, I recognize that. And so I don't know. I feel like this whole cast was sort of like a smorgasbord of like different niches within Hollywood and entertainment at the time, right? Like, because you have no like unless you knew or were watching Party of Five, you didn't know who Lacey Chabert was, which I didn't. Like, I was just like, who the fuck is this? And then like I knew who Gary Oldman was, I knew who William Hurt was, right? I knew who Heather Graham was because all this stuff was Matt LeBlanc, right? Like his friends, and I didn't watch Friends, but I knew who he was. And then as you get older, you're like, oh shit, oh my god, and then the principal was the original mom on Lost in Space, and you're like, oh my god, like I didn't know that. And my dad told me that, when I was younger. So, Mike, what did you think about the cast? What did you think about the overall appearance of the Robinsons et al?
I think the cast was perfectly fine. I think everybody pretty much said what I wanted to say about the cast. Matt LeBlanc, I was looking forward to his character, and I thought it was a good character, but I don't think he did much with it. I think this is kind of like the movie that showed that he can't really be a movie star. He should just stay on TV. Gary Oldman is great in anything he does. I actually like the fact that he went over the top with this and very campy, because I think the original show is very campy. I like the Doctor in the original show was very campy.
Yeah.
So I think it fit that. Lacey Chabert, like I said, I didn't know who that was. Heather Graham, I knew who that was, and I was, surprised and happy that she had more to do in this than she usually does. Mimi Rogers, I know who that was, and I thought she was good. William Hurt also, I thought he was just there. I mean, he was anytime I think of William Hurt, I think of like all his performances are like the same to me in everything he does. So I don't hold anything against him for that. That was fine. Jared Harris was actually, I didn't realize that until just recently, that was him. And I remember at the time I was kind of upset because I remember they brought back a lot of the original cast for other roles. And I thought, well, why didn't they just bring back the kid to play the older kid? And I was like, that would have been perfect. And then so I was kind of mad that they got someone else to play that part. Now that I find out it's Jared Harris, I'm like, well, of course he's a much better actor than whoever the other person would have been, But yeah. So I mean, the cast was fine. It was great. No real big things after that.
Yeah, I also I forgot that Lenny James was in this.
I just want to respond real quick. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but apparently, according to IMDb trivia, because that's where I get all my information, apparently they did approach, or at least I guess in the original script, the intention was to have the original 1960s TV Will Robinson play Jared Harris's part. And I guess somewhere along the line, they kind of, I can't remember if the director thought like, well, that's a step too far. And that's going to be super confusing. And that just feels super gimmicky, even though I'm like, but you're just going to pull this unknown future, awesome superstar actor just out of nowhere. But that's not as confusing. But it would have been, you've already set the precedent by literally anybody else who has a speaking role in this movie has a tie to the original. And then I also read that apparently some of the other members of the original TV cast, they were offered cameo roles and they were just like, I've never done a cameo. We do not do bit parts. And so it was very much a no, thank you kind of situation. But yeah, apparently along the line, that was supposed to be very much the intention. It would have been the TV Will Robinson.
I think it would have made more sense to have him play that part. Yeah. But oh well. Missed opportunities. Yeah. He missed out. Bill Murray is his name, I believe. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I do feel like Jared Harris definitely kept on to that, like, I've been trapped in this area with like the doctor for so long, and he still had that sort of like at the end, right, when he's talking to like himself and his family, like through the time portal, and like he still kept that like very adolescent sort of like, yeah, like I'm grown up, but I've had no one to like talk to mature or all that stuff, right? And like he still kept that like sort of like adolescent Will Robinson sort of theme with that, right? And I do definitely want to point that out. So sorry, I was supposed to get to this early on, and it's 8:40. But I do want to ask people's popcorn ratings on this. Let's start with Eric, since Eric has Pancake in the view. What does Pancake give this film?
Oh, Pancake was just like, I heard food, so I'm going to go with chaos and
Love
eat.
it. Love it.
Most food-driven cat I've ever met in my life. But I give this movie a 4 out of 5. Like I said, even like Toni and I agree, like the graphics even back then had issue because they were just a little bit off. But I love this movie. I always like now. We'll probably watch it maybe once every couple of years. I remember I used to watch it like every couple of months back when I had it on like VHS and early DVD. But yeah, I love this movie. I love the cast. I love the kitschiness about it and the campiness, and just overall, it's an enjoyable movie.
Yeah. Mike, what are we giving this film?
I give it 4 to 5, just because it was a fun movie. And I got what I wanted out of it. It was a good space adventure. And I didn't think, I never held it on a high pedestal. Like I realized why people were giving it low marks and stuff like when it came out, but for me, it was entertaining, and that's all I needed to get from it.
Yes. And Toni?
4 out of 5. Samesies. It's fun. It's awesome, but I also appreciate it because I like it as a time capsule of the late 90s. Especially now with this resurgence in like 90s, early millennium, like fashion and decor, everybody kind of like hangs on to like the Jinkos or like the tween mall rat kind of look with the low rise jeans and the skimpy tops. Everyone kind of forgets the cyberpunk trend that was like everywhere. And I love that even this movie, which is so desperately trying to like paint itself as futuristic, it's so 98. It is so 1998. Down to the everything is a mini disc because of course it's like sleeker and smaller than a CD, right? And of course, if you really wanted to, you too can go buy a mini disc at Best Buy. I also love the fashion. I'm just like, that looks exactly what would have been sold. There was a few like cyberpunk stores, and even Hot Topic before it turned into a merch shop. It would definitely deal in like this cyberpunk fashion. And the logos that are in the back, because I completely forgot this point. It's a graphics company. It's a computer graphics company that is sponsoring this trip into space. And the logo is full on like mid 1995. It's like, something like graphic. So it's like this massive like G with a huge like oblong like circle in the back. And then like it's like an orange and blue and white, and then like a neon green like splash somewhere. Because those were the only colors we dealt with back then. It was orange, blue, and neon green. That's it. And I even love that the ship looks like a vintage CD player, because I'm like, I definitely had that CD player, that big, bulky, waterproof.
Exactly.
You locked it into place, and you could even throw it into your pool. Like, yeah, thing. Like it looks like a CD player. And so I love it as a time capsule. I absolutely adore it. So 4 out of 5.
So funny story. Remember when it first launched, right? Before it got into space, that original like saucer was the original design for the Lost in Space ship TV show, right? Like, and it was like, that was a throwback to nostalgia, right? Like where it like launched, and then all of a sudden it just like exploded, and it became this like weird UFO type thing, which I was like, okay, cool. Like I wouldn't have known that, right? If I didn't watch like previous episodes where it was like, oh, it's a flying saucer that goes through space, right? And I'm like, yeah, so that was like an ode to sort of like the TV show. I also did a 4 out of 5 popcorn buckets for this. Same reason, because of nostalgia, but also because it's genuinely just like a lot of fun to watch, right? Like you're sitting there and you're like, cool, like there's not a dull moment. Oh, this guy's trying to sabotage. Cool. It doesn't end up working. Oh, they all wake up. Oh, the damsel in distress is dying. Oh, this is going on. Oh, and like there's just a bunch going on at once, which is what I loved about this movie, right? Like you're sitting there and you're like, I kind of want to watch it to the end. I kind of know what's gonna happen, but at the same time, I don't care because it's like it's just fun throughout the whole film. Clearly, there's problems with some acting, there's problems with some things that were going on right with it, but overall, generally, like the um the idea behind it, right? Like if we were to make a film like this today, a lot of the shit that they packed within this film would not fly, unintended, because they're flying through space. But like it wouldn't fly like with producers, with any sort of director, with anything, right? Because it'd be like, it's too much. Like too much is going on. The audience doesn't get it. But I feel like this does it in a way where like we get it, it's fun, and we're not like, that was too much, right? Like we're not like that story just didn't make sense, right? I feel like the fact that like they go through the first time portal or like time jump, right? And they find like a ship that was sent there to like rescue them, and then they find out that they're spiders, like that wasn't too much of a leap, right? And then all of a sudden they land, and then the dad's like, yeah, like that's a time portal, and we're like, okay, like I could get with that. It's cool. And then we just go with it, right? Like it's not like it's far fetched because we already know that this family has gone to extreme odds, right? It's not like Star Wars where it's like, let's go to like hyperspeed, right? And like you do it and you're like, oh, well, but we're going to a specific destination. Here we're like, oh, there's a hyperdrive, this is a smart family, it's invented, here we go, it's happening, and then it's just like they're lost, right? And we're like, oh, get it, lost in space. And so like I feel like this entire sort of synopsis of this film makes sense, and makes sense in a way where it was palatable for audiences, it was palatable for people that hadn't known what Lost in Space was. And yeah, so Cue Ball says, which Lost in Space do you prefer, the series or the movie? I don't know if any of you all have seen the series at all or checked out a couple episodes or anything like that. What did you all think about that? Let's answer Q really quickly. Let's go to Mike. What do you prefer?
So the original series or the remake series?
The original. Not the remake. We're not discussing Bruno tonight.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
So the movie then. I like the movie better.
Okay.
I'm into this, spaceships and robots, and I like the way they designed those in this one.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Eric, what do you think?
I would definitely go with the movie as well. From both series, even though we don't talk about Bruno, I would definitely still go with the movie, just because I feel it was more, like you said, more concise. But we went along with it for the ride, and we got the story, which is unfortunate to say that they wouldn't today, because some audiences need things way more explained to them today than back in the 1998, unfortunately.
Period. And Toni.
Movie. I never saw the remake series. I definitely have not seen the original series. I also do wonder, like, I don't really run into a lot of like fandom around the original Lost in Space series. Which is surprising because, like, we obviously fixated on this idea long enough to make a whole 1998 movie, and then also 20 years later make that Netflix series. So I'm just kind of curious as to like why there's never been like a substantial fandom that's kind of like sprung up around. Maybe they're hiding somewhere on Facebook and I just wildly unaware.
Maybe they're lost in space, who knows. I feel like with this new remake, right, like I wanted to watch it because of this film, and I watched it, and like I was severely disappointed. Like and I was like, God, like this was definitely an offshoot, and it was shot far off. Like it wasn't even like I couldn't relate to certain things within it. And then I found out, I'm like, fuck Netflix, you cancel shit that like is so amazingly awesome, and you have 3 seasons of this shit. Like and I like, and so I didn't even watch the second. I think there's a 3rd season out now, and I haven't watched it. I just have no interest in it, right? Because it totally derails from like the original. And I get it. Like I get reimaginings, I get like redoing things for like current audiences, like this definitely hit like it hit it or it missed the mark. It missed the mark totally. And for me, like definitely the movie, but like I did like the original only because like it went on for so long, and then there were totally other adventures that sort of contributed to the overall right like theme of like finding a place for humanity to survive, right? And it was just like they went to strange worlds where it was like, yeah, some of these worlds would be like definite reality, but then some of them are like, why? Like, where the fuck do you land, right? And so I definitely, you know, like, but I did like the movie because it encapsulated everything that was this sort of like series. But yeah, like you're not gonna lose sleep if you don't watch the new series, Tony. So like, it's not like watch it if you're like, like I'm bored, I have a gummy, like let's just fucking see what happens. And then if you don't, like it's not a big deal, right? So yeah, that part. But yeah, so definitely I think we all sort of like prefer the movie. So let's go to last minute thoughts. Would you recommend this movie to watch like as like a first date? Would you recommend this to show friends who are like, yeah, like I heard about it, but I don't know? Would you just show somebody that like is not a fan and is like, yeah, cool, like let's just watch a random movie? Would you throw it on? Let's start with you, Tony.
I definitely would recommend this movie. As you were talking about, you know, you made some comments about how if this were being made today, certain flourishes and certain elements wouldn't have made it through because there'd be way too much, you know, interference from creative studio control. And I realized one of the problems that, especially, you know, quality issues aside from the new series on Netflix, we don't currently have a sort of like cyberpunk like
Mm-mm.
subculture in
Mhm.
2023. In 1998, in the mid 90s, we had, because the internet was like this amazing, you know, incredible thing that was changing everything and changing everything very quickly. Computer graphics and computer technology and software and you know, hardware was like progressing at a very exponential rate. So we had this idea, even though it leaned more dystopian, you know, like you can
Yeah.
see that in Matrix, you can see that in Fifth Element, but there was always this sort of like silliness and hope and style. And that's why we really like hung on to it, because we were like, well, obviously we're not going to be responsible with this technology, and obviously we're going to run this planet into the ground, but we're going to course correct at the very last moment. So there's always like this little bit of hope within that like late 90s cyberpunk movement. But now we have like nothing about that, because our subculture is just culture at this point,
Mhm.
and it's very nihilistic at this point, because we're just like, it's so ingrained, we hate it, it's the mark of the beast, we're all going to be tracked by the deep state, you know. It's just like a lot of nihilism right now around technology, and a lot of like it's so normalized to the point where people are just overwhelmingly
Sure.
negative. There's not anything really positive about it, because we have not approached what the next thing is going to be
Mhm.
yet. However, today I do want to point out that NASA did announce their new crew for the Artemis 2. These are the folks that are going to be going back to the moon for like the first time in a long time. I think they're doing a moon orbit is what they're doing. I don't think they're actually walking on the moon again. Um, I'm hoping that this might be one of many things that kind of like turns our attitudes around like technology and about the future. Because as of right now, I think we're all just kind of like in this very depressed dystopia. I think we're all just dealing with like a lot of ADHD and
Yeah.
neurodivergent burnout, and we can't really like fathom an optimistic future right now. But I'm hoping that, you know, in the next few years that we're gonna like shift it around, and maybe we start like applying some optimism to our sci-fi. So yes, after all, I would recommend this, because this is actually a very optimistic film, even though it's very gloomy and it's very like brown and gray and very like dirty looking. It's really sweet at the heart of it.
Yeah, you know, that was so I think that I think that was deeper than than what you meant, because as you said that, no, for real. Because as you said that, I was like, shit, like we've become so sort of like, I don't want to say complacent, numb. So like the technology that we have now, like we have fucking AIs telling us what to write on our resumes, telling us what to write in emails, telling us what to do, right? And I feel like back then, this was technology that we could have hoped for, right? where it's like now if somebody were to try to produce this, we'd be like, okay, cool, that's gonna come in 10 years, fine, like whatever, like it's not a big deal, right? And I feel like that's important, and it's because we've become so complacent with like technology and how the needs of how like it's almost like, you know, that film AI, like if it were to like come out now, we'd be like, oh yeah, that's attainable within 5 years, right? And so what is the next best thing, right? Like what is that thing where, you know, and I also think it's like all these sci-fi films that are like 2023 and we're like, wait, we're in that year and we still don't have fucking flying cars, right? Like we
Hoverboards. Where's the
still,
hoverboard?
yeah, like we still don't have that. And you're right, like it's because we've become so sort of like immune to the technology that we have in this day and age that like what is going to top that, right? Like what is the future? What is now, right? It's no longer your H.G. Wells like time machine. It's like, okay, cool, time machine, but let's make it fashion, right? Like let's make it cute. Let's make it something that people can be like, oh, that's something that we don't have, right? And it's definitely that fine line between that. And so, wow, that's real. That was like really deep, and I'm gonna be thinking about that like in my dreams, like for real. Like that was wow. Let's go to you, Eric. What did you think about this? Final thoughts. Is this something that you would recommend to anybody?
Oh yeah, I would definitely recommend. It's a fun time. It's campy. It's futuristic for what we thought it would be. Saying what you're saying and everything like that. It's fun. Watch it. Don't judge it too harshly with the graphics, but watch it. But Toni, for what you were saying, like how everything like that, a TV show I recommend you watch is Altered Carbon. I think they do a very good job.
I love
of
the first season. I've not seen the later ones yet. So
Same, but bringing that into like a future thing and bringing it a different level than what we have now, I think that does a good job of what we're talking about.
I liked everything but the last episode of the last season because I have a real issue with where they take it. But ultimately, the themes of it, I really was all about. So we'll talk about that later. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, go watch the movie. It's fun. Love it.
I love it.
Young relationship there.
And Mike, what are our last minute thoughts on this? Would you recommend this?
So as much as I liked it, I don't know if I'd recommend it to anybody. Maybe sci-fi fans, I would recommend it to. I would like to see
Sure.
this in like a convention with like fans of the show and see how they react to it. Because I don't think I ever really got to be around fans of that original property. So it'd be kind of cool to see how they take to the new changes and stuff like that. But as far as I think it's just something that I enjoyed. I don't think I feel the need to like spread the word about it though. You know what I mean?
I'm
Yeah,
just
you
saying,
would-
let's submit a panel. Isn't like there's some cons coming up, right? We can celebrate the 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
Of Lost in
Oh,
Space.
those have those
Let's
like
start it. Let's
Yeah.
just do it. We're gonna be the Lost in Space panel. They're gonna be like, you weren't even fucking in this. Oh well, we're just spreading awareness.
I'm a big fan, so
Yeah, like we're a huge
Yeah.
fan. Oh my god. Well, for me, this is definitely a nostalgic film that I was definitely obsessed with when I was a kid, and definitely loved. And clearly as a closeted little gay boy, like I was like Matt LeBlanc's hot. I was like fucking William Hurt's a little daddy, and I was like, even for me, like at this young age, I was like, Will Robinson, like what's going on, man? Like, cool, you're in a robots, I'm in a robots. I love it, right? And so I think for me, yeah, it was definitely a point in my life where I was into sci-fi. I was already into all these sort of films, and this one just sort of like was like sort of that little like curtail into how I sort of became like, I don't know, like a nerd with this stuff, right? And I loved it, right? Like, and it gives me so many memories of going with my dad to the theater and watching this, and like having the DVD and watching it whenever I could, and having like the little toys, right? Like, I think it was like all of them had their like separate toys in their like cryopods, and like I wanted to collect them all, and so I had like most of them in their cryopods. I think like Will like had like the little like he had like a little like robot with like his little like pad, his little data pad, and then like I think I got Penny because she had her little like wristwatch, and she had all that, and then I think I had Matt LeBlanc's character with like a gun and like he had a little thing. So it was definitely something that like I definitely refer to as nostalgic and I love. And so yes, we're reaching the end of our wonderful, amazing, and beautiful review for Lost in Space, the 1998 movie. Before we leave and before I say goodbye, I'd like to thank my guests, Eric, Mike, and Toni. You all were amazing. You all are wonderful and awesome. Where can we find you on the socials? Let's start with you, Mike. Where can we find you?
GripC47 on Instagram and Twitter, and yeah, that's it. Yeah.
We love it. And Eric, where can we find you?
You can find me everywhere on Instagram, Snapchat, all of those, except for Twitter, because I really don't use that anymore. But at Heartless7, that's HARTL, the number 3, SS7, and that's where you can find me.
And if you don't know where his name came from, he's getting a tattoo.
I am.
Of
It's
it.
yet to, that's why most of this you'll see me doing this, because it's still very much healing, and it's
Stop
Oh my
itching it.
No.
I'm not. I'm touching.
No, no, I don't believe that shit.
No, I don't
That's
scratch. No, I have too many tattoos to do scratch.
Good. No, I saw your draft and I'm so excited to see it. I was
It's
like,
gonna be too. I'll show it
Yeah.
to you guys next month when it's done.
yay! All right, and Toni, last but not least, where can we find you on the social?
Yeah, you guys can find me everywhere at the Toni Sanchez, Toni with an I, Sanchez with a Z.
I love it. We love it. Follow all these wonderful, amazing individuals. They're doing wonderful and amazing things in the world and in their lives. You can find me on Instagram, CityStars13. I haven't posted anything, Jesus, since, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? But you know what? It's going to happen one day or another when I'm not busy. And I post funny stories on there all the time, so you can find the funny stories anyway. Please, 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 everybody, give it up for my guests. We love them. But that's all the time we have to talk about Lost in Space today. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going, as well as subscribing to all of our platforms. They are at Nom Talk Network. We are everywhere. Please subscribe. We love subscribers. We love people who comment. We love people who give us suggestions to do, except for Eric when he comments, do it in third person. But tune into our next show, which is going to be on the 5th. Mike Manalo will be hosting our Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, the new movie that's coming out. So if you haven't seen it, don't tune in that night, but watch the recording and watch the movie and then watch the recording after. Some of the people that are on here might be on there talking about that movie, which is going to be awesome and amazing. And I'm so excited to see it. But until then, I am your host, Jordyn Orozco, and I hope you have a nomorific evening. We'll see you all later.